For When People Ask by Rosemary Watola Tromer. I want a word that means okay and not okay. More than that, a word that means devastated and stunned with joy. I want the word that says, I feel it all at once. The heart is not like a songbird singing only one note at a time, more like a tuvan throat singer, able to sing both a drone and simultaneously 2 or 3 harmonics high above it. A sound, the tuvans say, that gives the impression of wind swirling among rocks. The heart understands swirl, how the churning of opposite feelings weaves through us like an insistent breeze, leads us wordlessly deeper into ourselves, blesses us with paradox, so we might walk more openly into this world so rife with devastation, this world so ripe with joy. Thank you. Thank you for listening. And by now you will have seen that we popped the poem into the chat room. So if you want to reference it later. Everyone is frozen on my screen, so I'm not quite sure if you're hearing me. Can you give me a wave if you're actually hearing me speak?
We can hear you.
Mary, I only saw you wave and nobody else.
But they did. They did, Heather. We can hear you.
Okay, now I'm seeing. Okay, now I'm seeing some waves. I apologize. I did not realize how much of a challenge it would be finding reliable Wi-Fi in Guatemala, where I'm currently traveling. So we're going to do our best and hopefully be heard as much as possible. So how this is going to go today, just to give you a bit of a sense of what our plan is for this webinar, is Mary and I are going to have a conversation and back and forth, giving you around 10 kind of tips for practicing lightness, freedom, and joy. And we're going to take a break kind of halfway through in case there's any questions or reflections. We want this to be conversational, but it might be a bit too much to pause after each one. So if you've got a question about the first or second, hold that thought and we'll give an opening a little bit later for conversation around it. So, and then one of the other things I want to mention is at the end of this call, we want to hold a little draw. We're going to give away a free registration for our course, Know Yourself, Free Yourself, at the end of this call. And the way to be entered into that draw is that you just have to remember one of the tips that we're going to share and reflect back to us which of the tips resonated with you today and which one perhaps do you have some intention to follow up with after this call. So that's just pay attention, just enough intention at least to remember one tip that you want to pursue in some way after the call, and then you can be entered in to win the draw for a free registration for our course. We are going to have also after Mary and I.
Can they put that in the chat when they have a tip that they want to remember? They want to put that in the chat?
Yes, but it would simplify it if they put it in after, once we ask for it to be shown in there, because we're going to do it after the breakout rooms. So for one thing, I don't know if all of the chat stuff will be retained. So let's do it then, and then we'll gather those names after we do. So that was the other thing I was going to mention. We will do a breakout room a little later in the call, just so you have a little bit more chance for some intimate conversation with some of the other people present, and we'll talk about some of the things we're talking about today. So that's the introduction. Mary, let's dive in and start talking about joy. Actually, I think we talked about me going first, but because I just gave the introduction, I'm inclined to pass it over to you to share the first one.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to just welcome everyone and thank you for coming. It was exciting to see how many people are interested in this topic. And yeah, how important it really is. Heather and I she was just in Costa Rica. So my name is Mary and I live in Costa Rica. For those of you that don't know me, it's nice to meet you. And I run a small center for professional development for educators and community leaders. And I also work at the Center for Holding Space right now as a facilitator in the Foundations program. And Heather was just in Costa Rica, and we ran a retreat, which was beautiful, and tenderness and liberation. And there's a few people who were at the retreat who are there. We have some foundation people here and friends here. And I see some friends from the English language teaching world as well. So it's really nice to see a mix of people here. So in the conversations that Heather and I were having, the idea of joy came up. And okay, I guess one other thing that I'm also doing right now is I'm serving as a mentor on a course called Awakening Joy. And it's a course run by a meditation teacher named Jim Baraz. And he wrote a book about it, and he's been running this course since 2003. And so he has some the ideas that mostly come out of the Buddhist tradition. And so the concept of joy and lightness and really intentionally leaning into, and when possible, choosing or sourcing joy and lightness, to me, has led to a lot of freedom in my life. And for me, it's an ongoing path. And I think the first tip that I would like to share about is, it might sound obvious, but I'm not sure how obvious it is. But the first tip I want to share is just actually making it a habit to learn about joy and to learn about happiness. I don't know about you all, but I didn't grow up in a culture or a space that actually taught me or encouraged me to be proactive in understanding my own happiness and joy. I don't, did any of you all have that? Did you have somebody who said, this is how you can be joyful in your life? And yes, you have to hold on to the hard things. If you have to learn about it. Did anybody have that? No, me neither. Me neither. If you did, wow, that's awesome. One of the best things about growing up for me is that we can choose to study now and learn whatever we want to learn. And so my first big tip is really to take it on to learn about joy and happiness and lightness. And I'm saying joy and happiness, and I'm guessing that at some point someone will have a question of what's the difference between joy and happiness. And for the purposes of today, I'm not going to go into that too deeply. There are a lot of different ideas that you can go into. And there's some that I find interesting and useful, but for the most part, and I feel like the idea is a feeling of well-being, goodness, gladness. You could say joy, you could say happiness. I think you need to choose a word that you like, because some people might hear the word joy and just go, ugh, like that sounds really too sweety and sugar-coated and, ugh, not my word. Okay, choose your own word. Right? And if you like joy, and that's a word that I'm going to be using, great. And if you don't like it, just substitute it with whatever word is good for you. And then I think just really think about, what do you know about it already? What's your relationship to joy? What's your relationship to happiness? What's your history of joy or happiness? Like those three questions of like really learning about it, and about learning about your own relationship can make a huge difference. There are different lenses for thinking about it. I have been studying through a Buddhist psychological lens. So a lot of my foundation comes from reading and meditating. There's a Catholic Christian lens on joy and happiness that's really beautiful. There's also a positive psychology lens, like positive psychology research lens. And there are ample resources out there in all of those areas. I think a lot of them boil down to three main things. Being present, like really knowing how to be in the present moment. And then practicing, like making it an intention. And so that's why one of the reasons we chose today, this idea of practicing this, because it's It's not, it's a practice. It's a habit. It's a skill. It's not something, and I also think it's something that actually is innately inside of us. I think that growing up, our cultures tend to not, at least the cultures that I've been in and lived in, don't necessarily encourage us to really cherish our ability to be joyful. So it's a practice, and then it also comes out of an intention or a purpose. So that's my first tip, is learn about it from whatever lens is good for you. Contemplate your own relationship to it and your own history of it. Those are the first one I'm thinking about. Heather, you want to add anything to that?
Well, what I was thinking, just in the interest of making this a collaborative, sorry, the sound is a little bit delayed. Can you hear?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So what I was thinking, in the interest of making this a collaborative learning space, what might be fun, because the first one you brought in was learning about joy, and we all have different sources to learn. It'd be fun for people to just pop into the chat. Like, what are your sources to learn about joy? Have you read any great books about it? Watched any films that really inspired you towards what we're talking about today? One of the ones that comes up for me, I was pretty profoundly impacted by the Book of Joy by the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And there's also Netflix film now out called Mission Joy that's shows the two of them in this just really joyful relationship, and how they come from different spiritual backgrounds, but come to the same place of joy later in their life. I see somebody else pop that book into the comments. So there's a few, yeah. And by the way, if there's lots of good comments and you don't want to take notes frantically, you can at the end save the comments. There's a little thing at the bottom where you can, I can't remember exactly where it was, but I think there's 3 dots somewhere where you can click and save the chat room and go back later to look at the books that were mentioned. So I'll move to our next point then. And the one that I wanted to share first is that you find your joy people. And this isn't something I can claim as my own idea. This was actually several years ago. I'm going to say 10 or 12 years ago, I was beginning to build my business. And some of you may have heard me, I think I've mentioned this on a blog post before, but I had gone to a networking event, and it was one of these kind of dry spaces where everybody was trying to get their business cards in as many hands as possible to network about their business. And I came home just feeling like, oh, that wasn't the environment that I wanted to be in for building my business. And it didn't feel like it was really serving the purpose of my business. And then I was having a conversation with my friend Desiree Attaway, and she said, you're going about it the wrong way. She said, you have, instead of thinking about it as networking and layering on kind of a negative connotation on what you're doing, you have to go out there and find your joy people. Who are the joy people that are going to help you grow your business? And that completely transformed the way that I built my business. I thought, I'm going out there, finding the people that really resonate with my work, the people that bring me joy in this work, the people who are learning joy themselves, practicing joy themselves. And that's really been how I built the business. It's how Krista and I developed a partnership. It's how I brought in members of the teams who is contributing to the joy of the work that I'm doing. And so how do I define joy people? I think joy people, it's not necessarily people that are always joyful, because to be honest, those people sometimes get under my skin. The people that are always really cheerful, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the people who bring joy to your life, who contribute in some way to having a meaningful and joyful life. And it can be the people that you cry with too. Those are definitely people who bring you joy, because they know how to hold space for you. They know how to be present for you in tough times, but they also know how to be really present in your joyful times. And so I encourage you to seek out the people that bring that out in you, that bring out your joy, people who are playful, people who are who help you spark your own sense of joy in your life. Mary, anything you want to add about that one? By the way, I should say that Mary and I spent 5 weeks in Costa Rica, and I can say unequivocally that Mary is one of my joy people, which is why we're doing this work together.
Heather, I actually came up, I was reminded of a story that's really personal that I'd like to share about joy people. And it's not so much of finding one, but trying to be one for someone else. When my father died, one of the big, when someone dies, we don't know what's going to happen inside of us. There's no way we can completely prepare for that. And one of the things that came up for me was a profound question of like, did I bring joy to his life? And it's not a question that I don't want anybody to say, oh, of course you did, Mary. Like that's not the idea of this question. This is a deep question that just kept resonating. I mean, it's very emotional to feel it. And, it's like, did I bring joy to his life? And it went through me. It's still going through me. But the answer that came to me was not a yes or no to whether I brought joy to his life. I'm sure I did. Like, he loved me. I loved him. Like, we're good. Yeah. But that was a deep question that's there. But the answer that came to me has been so beautiful. The answer that came to me was, I want the children in my life to know that they really bring me joy. And so I just love being with them. And I'm sure they're going to say, yeah, Mary, we know that you love us. We know you're having fun. Like, we know, like they're going to get sick of me telling them how much I just enjoy being with them. And I really do get a lot of joy. They are joy people for me, but I also somehow want them to know and receive the fact that, I don't know if I'll be a joy person for them. I guess that's what I want. I want them to know that they're a joy people for me. And someday that might make a difference in their life. And that was the answer that came to me. So, yeah. And the rainbow, I picked the rainbow background today because of a Maya Angelou quote about being rainbows in other people's lives. And I think that joy people are rainbows in our lives. So, yeah. I'm curious if anybody wants to put it. Oh.
I think we were going to say the same thing. I was going to say, before you go to your next point, I would just love to invite people to pop their joy people into the chat. Just spend a moment reflecting on who are your joy people. Who comes up and who do you want to honor in the chat? And you may want to come off this call later and send them a quick text and say, and just let them know that you named them as your joy people today. Mm-hmm. Let's see some names showing up. Passing it back to you, Mary.
I love seeing the names coming up. Let's see.
And I so appreciate what you say about being other people's joy people, because I think it's a two-way. I think these are reciprocal practices that when we show up, we can't just look for joy people. We have to commit to being each other's joy people as well, so that it is a give and take relationship.
And it's not something that's forced, right? I feel like there's a number of people here in this room that are joy people for me. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for bringing joy to my life. Yeah. I'm loving seeing these names. Thank you all for sharing people's names. And students and children. It's beautiful. All right, the second point I want to share about bringing joy and lightness is about setting an intention to actually do it. I think that that's another area. It's another life skill that I didn't grow up with. Today, I'm confessing all the life skills I didn't grow up with, but one of them is setting intentions and really starting like, I love the verb to source and sourcing. So like, what am I sourcing in my daily life? And am I sourcing joy? Am I sourcing happiness? And how do I do that? How do I lean into joy? How do I create this intention? So I had a core question for this is like, what really is your deep intention? Because it's important to recognize if your intention is not joy. That's okay, right? This is not about what we have to do, should do. It really is about starting with what is it that you'd like it to be, but what is it right now? And if I have a deep intention that's not about joy, I just want to honor that and explore that, right? And you can look at studies and you can look at joy practices and see that they all start to talk about the power of actually setting an intention and sort of leaning into it if you really do want it. And it helps us keep perspective and balance, right? One of the things I often do is list making. And if I'm going to make a list of all the things that bring me joy, and like I might list a list of all the things that I feel stressed about. And I do this activity a lot with participants on my courses. And it's fascinating to see. Sometimes in the beginning, it's easier to write the list of things that I'm stressing about and feeling bad about than the things that bring me joy. But over time, with practice, it's easier to balance both. And just keeping that's like a little practice that helps me tap into my intention. Another practice that helps me tap into my intention is to start to cultivate a practice of thinking about what's the emotional weight of my experience. So for example, I have a nice cup of coffee here, and it's really nice. It's a nice little cappuccino. I feel good. It's bringing me joy. But what's the weight of that? And I like to play around with like 0 to 100. I'm just playing here. It's not like anything right. It's not about right or wrong, but it's to develop a practice of, okay, this little cappuccino is giving me a weight of 2. I'm happy, but it's not like a huge happiness. It's a nice happiness, no joy. I might, later on today, I'm going to go see a friend and spend some time with some friends that I haven't spent time with in 15 years. That's a 97 happiness. Right? It's like a 97. It's a huge joy and happiness. And so just practicing honoring the weight of things that bring me joy, also honoring the weight that things that are hard. So today it was kind of hot outside. I'm in Mexico City. I'm not really a city person, and I went out to go have a little adventure and have some breakfast, and it was really hot, and I got to a point where I was a little bit uncomfortable. So that was like a little bit of a weight, like a 5, maybe heavy. When I first arrived in Mexico City a week ago, and I was at the airport, and this guy started like trying to get me to take my phone out and show him some things, and I just felt really, really uncomfortable. That was more like a 30, right, of a negative experience. So practicing this in that moment, it was interesting because I think an older me might have taken my phone out in that moment to show it to him. And then I don't know if like he could have taken it and run away. I don't know. Maybe he was a good guy. I just had bad feelings. But because I was recognizing that I was feeling uncomfortable, it was starting to rise. I had more skills. I was like, okay, wait a minute. I'm feeling uncomfortable. This is a little bit weighty. And then my first go-to when I'm traveling, if I feel uncomfortable, is find a place to sit down and have something to drink. And there was a really nice coffee shop right there. So I just said, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to go sit. And even though I had people waiting for me at a hotel, I said, just send them a message, said, I'm going to sit for a minute. I'll be there as soon as I can. And so having the capacity to identify like how much something weighs gives me an opportunity to also figure out how to respond. Right? And that also it's coming from this intention of, I want to source joy. I want to source happiness and lightness. And I also need to be aware and awake. It's not like just because this person was talking to me at the airport and I was feeling uncomfortable, I had to think, oh no, I have to be happy and joyful now. It's like, no, I still need to be careful. I still need to be careful. So that's a skill that I think, and a practice that I think is really helpful in order to balance. There's two other little parts of in leaning into joy and cultivating joy that I think are really nice. One is to create intentional touchstones to help you remember that you want to touch into joy or lean into joy. And, you know, a touchstone, it could be a ring, could be a bracelet, it could be maybe just even a place on your face, right? Like just rubbing your face. Oh yeah, that's right. I want to pump some joy, right? It could be whatever your touchstone is, but making it a practice to visit your touchstone, to touch your touchstone, and just remember that that's an intention. And I saw in the chat, somebody had mentioned the grateful.org organization, and that I really love this brother David Steindl-Rast's practice, stop, look, and go. And it's another way to tap into intention, to have this practice of stopping and looking and then continuing on. And so I just popped in the chat his website, their website. It's a great website. We're going to talk about gratitude as another practice, but I think that practice of stop, look, and go is really nice for tapping into intention. So, Heather, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, just one thing that came up when you first mentioned setting an intention toward joy. I do want to be intentional about naming that what we're talking about here is not spiritual bypassing, where you have to pretend to be joyful all the time, or pretend, or, you know, some of the self-help language around always thinking good thoughts or things like that. That feels like a bypass of some of the really deep and hard emotions. And so I don't want us to be talking about that. I want us to be honest about, and Mary's reflecting on the other kinds of emotions, like being honest about those times that, you know what, I'm going through some really deep grief here. That doesn't mean I'm going to try to turn that grief into joy and walk down the street grinning because I've lost a family member. No, it's still being really present for the painful emotions, for the hard things that happen in life, while still being intentional about, and I want to turn towards joy whenever I can. So my next point I'm going to bring in is another one that I learned from somebody else. As you can tell, a lot of my joy learning has been inspired by other people, and I like to give them credit where credit is due. And this next one is finding your joy triggers. And this one came to me when I interviewed Dr. Robin Youngson. I interviewed him for the Know Yourself, Free Yourself program. And Dr. Robin Youngson was a longtime emergency room doctor, has had quite a lot of trauma in his life, and has also been present for a lot of trauma in the emergency room. And so later in his life became a student of trauma, really trying to learn how to help people in traumatic situations. And
Heather, I think we've missed a lot
now
of
a
what
specialist in
you
practice
said.
called evening. When I was, the question I asked was, oh shoot,
Can you just start
cut
again?
out. Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you. Do you mind just starting again?
Okay.
Oh, Heather, you've frozen and she's gone. Oh, she's back.
I think I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, let's try this again. So the point I was making is to find your joy triggers. And this was inspired by Dr. Robin Youngson. And he's a long-time medical doctor in New Zealand who's been working in emergency rooms. So alongside a lot of people with dealing with trauma, has had a lot of trauma in his own life. And later in his career, he began to specialize in trauma because he really wanted to help people learn how to heal and how to deal with the traumas in their lives. And he became trained in this practice called havening touch. And I can share later, or somebody else can pop his links. There's lots of videos you can find him doing this practice on YouTube. And I interviewed him for Know Yourself, Free Yourself, because I've gotten to know him in recent years. And the last question I always ask people in those interviews is what their source of joy is, where they are finding joy. Because in the program Know Yourself, Free Yourself, it very intentionally is leading you through your self-exploration to a point of deeper joy and deeper love in your life. And so that's the question I always land at. And Dr. Youngson answered the question, talked about what brought him joy. And he said that in his learning around trauma, he learned that there are not only trauma triggers, things like little moments that trigger the old trauma that you have, but there are also joy triggers. And I found that such an intriguing thought. And I've since been really paying attention to it. And he said, there are those little things or little moments that can trigger you back to a childhood joy or something really pure and joyful in your youth. And so he gave the example. He says, every time I hop on my bicycle, I'm transported back to that moment when I was a child and I just felt free riding my bike around the neighborhood. And so ever since then, I've been really paying attention and trying to notice what are my joy triggers, what awakens joy in my body. And one of the things I noticed just last week, actually, I was here in Guatemala. I did a hike through a national reserve area. And there were all these swinging bridges through the jungle. You could cross these bridges to get to this beautiful waterfall. And as I was crossing one of these bridges, I suddenly realized, oh, this is a joy trigger for me, because I grew up in a small town that didn't have a lot going on. It was a pretty small town in rural Manitoba, but we did have in our park, in the town, we had a swinging bridge that crossed the river. And that swinging bridge is a place we loved to play. And I was on a farm and we didn't get to go out. We didn't travel much when I was a child. So going to our park, it was for the track and field day for school. There were these moments when we got out at the park. And when we did, playing on that swinging bridge was a moment of joy for me. We would see who could, you know. Let me know when you're hearing me again.
I can hear you again.
You can hear me again.
Yeah, I heard playing on the bridge was
All
a trigger, joy trigger for you. That's what I heard last.
Yeah. So that's, yeah. I reflect little things that bring up joy for me. And so I've been really thinking about this because I do a lot of time thinking about and teaching around trauma. And I wonder if we can learn about using our joy triggers to actually heal our trauma. Like, what if we intentionally, when you're feeling turn joy that can going on, the nervous system activation, is there, and Mary having touched on joy, is there something that joy maybe really stuck down or something like that, or coloring in a coloring book, maybe that's one of your joy triggers. You can do that as a practice to help soothe your nervous system in those moments. So that's something that I've been trying to practice and play with in my own life.
Well, I want to invite everyone to share in the chat.
What triggers are.
We've got a little bit of a delay. I want to invite people to share in the chat. What are some things that trigger joy for you? Yeah. Oh, thanks. Lucy put in the havening.org, the havening touch. It's a beautiful one. Sitting in a sunbeam, seeing wildlife, sunrises, picking berries, playing with dogs, crafting, swimming, sunshine. Yeah. Seeing kids ride a bike. For me, one of them is having unexpected conversations. Last night I was sitting at a park bench in a little park here in Mexico City and ended up having a very interesting conversation with a total stranger. It was just nice. It was nice to learn about their lives. Laughing, the smell of fresh grass, cooking for and sharing meals with others. Beautiful. Beautiful. Heather, I'm thinking it's about 2:40. I'm thinking it might be interesting nice to have people invite people into breakout rooms to have some conversation and then come back and have some question and answers. Or I could share one more and then we could go. Either one. Two more.
How about share one more and then we'll pop into breakout rooms for a while.
Okay. Great. Okay, the next one that I want to share is actually, it's an important part of the balancing so that I can actually feel joy. In order to feel joy, I think I also have to be able to feel sorrow. So my tip now is honoring the unpleasant things in life. How do you hold yourself and your experiences when you're not joyful? And learning about that aspect of life and our relationships in life is, to me, one of the important foundations of being able to have an intention around joy. So, I remember when I was with a monk, a Buddhist monk in Northern California, and I was going through a lot of suffering around the death of someone very dear to me, and he leaned in and he just said, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to not be okay. And I could hear that in my brain, but it's taken a long time to integrate that into my life and into my practice, and to learn to actually honor it when I'm not okay, and not be judgmental. I should be okay. Why am I not okay? To say, I'm not okay. And to be able to really, truly explore that, not in a way that's like really self-centered, but in a way that's very caring and genuine, and that allows that pain to have an important place in my life. So practicing non-judgmentalism in relation to not feeling okay. And then the other practice for me that has become really important over the years is when I am not okay, and when I have a pain in my life or something that was really something really hard, the hard stuff, I have decided now that that's actually something very precious to me. And so I hold that in a little golden box in my hand, a little metaphorical golden box. And this is my pain. It's very precious. And I have to treat my pain as if it is very precious. And I want to, I want to treat it as if it's something very precious, and that I share it with people very intentionally when I know that there are people that will also treat my pain as precious. Okay? And it's actually with those people who can hold that pain as precious that I can also feel the most joyful, right? So there's that little piece of honoring these unpleasant things and really treating it as something very precious in my life. And it also by sort of metaphorically putting that pain into my little precious box, I'm also saying that I am not my pain. Right? The pain is a part of my life, but it's not completely who I am. And so it helps me create a little bit of space that I can then explore it, right? Explore it, cherish it, see what else it needs to happen with it so that it can live its life and then move on, right? So that is the next practice that I'm offering, is consider honoring unpleasant things so that you can then honor joy. Heather, you want to add anything to that piece?
Yeah, I think I'm actually going to bring in one of my next points that I won't have as much time to expound on, but I think it's related to what you're saying. And that is one of the things that I have discovered is that sometimes you actually need to cry yourself into joy. And that sometimes I have found that a really big emotional release just allows me to enter a different emotional space. So when I am honoring those hard feelings, when I'm realizing that there's anxiety and frustration really tightly wound in my body, sometimes if I can just like have a good cry, release it, curl up in my bed in a fetal position, something like that, and just cry it all out, then afterwards I can breathe more deeply. And all of a sudden I'll look up and notice, oh, the world looks different now. I can start to move into gratitude. I can start to notice the colors in the sky or the flowers or something. And so it is honoring those harder emotions sometimes so that you can make space for joy to return, for you to see, for noticing what's beautiful in the world and what brings you joy. So with that, Mary, I think it's time to send people into, let's do a 10-minute breakout room, and then we'll come back for some conversation and some thoughts. And this will just be a chance for you to talk. I think Lucy's going to drop the questions that we're going to encourage you to talk about in your breakout room. So introduce yourself by sharing something about why you want to find more lightness, freedom, and joy. And share some of the tips maybe that resonated with you and why. And if you have time, talk about what gets in the way of your joy as well. If there are things that you feel like are boundaries or barriers to your joy as well.
I wanted to just give everyone a heads up. We're going to send you to breakout rooms. If you're in a room by yourself, just wait for a little bit. I'm going to be watching who's going. If somebody doesn't want to go, you don't have to go. And we're going to be watching. If you're in a room by yourself, we'll either move someone into your room or move you out of the room. So please to have a little bit of patience with us in case something like that happens. Just let you know we're watching sort of where people are going and to make sure that everybody has at least a partner or two in the room with them. All right.
Just to also say, if you don't want to go into a breakout room, but you don't want to leave the call, you still want to hear the rest of the conversation, you can feel free to stay in the main room, and you can even mute yourself and turn off your video and go do something for 10 minutes if that's your preference, to stay with us later. That's your choice. We'll be honored.
Yeah. So those that are going to go to breakout rooms, enjoy your time together.
I might pause the recording. Yes.
Let's see.
Welcome back to those that are popping back in. Just a minute or two, and they'll all be in here. Well, some people are joining now. There's a few people that are just joining. I'm not sure if they were already on the call and are coming back, or if they might have gotten the time zone wrong. We are an hour into the call, but if you're joining us now, you're more than welcome to join us whenever you can.
I accidentally left when I left the room. I accidentally left the whole meeting, so I just came
did
back.
you?
Welcome
Okay.
back.
Are you glad you're back?
Here I am.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to open it up for a bit of conversation if people want to share. But before we do that, because I want to give, Lucy's going to be our technician in the background, drawing a name for our prize. And we want to give her plenty of time to enter all your names into the draw. So the question I'm going to ask you to pop into the chat right now is, what is one thing you're going to do to invite more joy into your life based on some of what you've heard? And it could be our tips, but it could also be something you heard in your breakout room. What's one thing you're going to do to embrace joy?
Heather, can we also open it up to comments or questions as well? Would that be?
Yeah, that's what I was going to do next, but I wanted to kind of keep those things separate a little bit because I wanted to give Lucy a chance to write down, to track all those names. So the next thing I was going to do, so once you've yeah, keep popping those into the chat. And then if somebody wants to raise a hand, if there's something that you're reflecting on or a question you want to ask, or just want to contribute something to the conversation, we welcome you to raise a hand. The best way to do it to make sure you catch our attention is to do it under the reactions button. There's a raise hand button, I think, yeah, at the bottom of it. That's the best way, because I've got two screens, so I might miss you otherwise if you're just waving. Mary's going to help keep track of who's raising hands. But Lisa, I see your hand first, and then Raj after that.
I'm just reflecting on my own experience, but also one of my both of my conversation partners around both the kind of family culture and the wider culture that doesn't prioritize the exploration of joy. And I was sharing, I come from a Christian tradition, and this last year I came to the fairly startling realization that the phrase "love your neighbor as yourself" it is set up as this fixed point. Well, here's this measurement point, as yourself, as if, that would be kind of basic knowledge for everyone. And it was really startling for me to find out that actually that was not my default position. And it has been quite exhausting, actually, to sit with both the grief of that, but also it's actually a learned skill. Like if you get to 52 years old and you haven't prioritized your own joy, then you actually have some fairly significant learning to do. And the unconditioned, and particularly the conditioning around that there's something profoundly selfish about joy. And then the other part, and this is just more me kind of processing out loud, so I'm grateful for that, but I'm also startled, a little taken aback, and kind of it is what it is, actually, how long this work takes. This is not a one and done. This is not, I'm going to use 2022 and 2023 to figure out what makes me joyful. It's like, I needed to use 2022 and the first part of 2023 to find out I actually didn't have that as my fixed point. And then I feel like I'm going to need to actually grow those muscles, figure it out, and then, do some reassessing.
Yeah. Thank you. Absolutely.
Thank you for that, Lisa. I just something that I read recently, earlier this week, somebody asked the Dalai Lama once a question about how to teach people about self-love. And the Dalai Lama turned to his translator. The question was asked in English. The Dalai Lama turned to his translator, had this long back and forth with this really puzzled look on his face, and then turned back to the person that had asked the question. And it turned out that the Dalai Lama was completely puzzled by the question. He had no concept that people wouldn't have self-love. Like it just had never occurred to him. And what the writer of this article I was reading was saying that it is quite a Western, it's really rooted some of our Western traditions and religions, that the idea of sin, and many of us were raised with that, to not embrace self-love and joy is kind of rooted in our cultural history and our lineage. And I found that fascinating, that when you learn more about some of the Eastern traditions, it's not necessarily true in those cases. So yeah, recognizing that for ourselves, what is our lineage of joy? What's our history of how we were taught to embrace it or not embrace it? Raj, see your hand.
Heather and Mary, just two quick points. One of them is about self-care. I really look at self-care, selfish as self-care. Like if I could be, start to care for myself instead of calling myself selfish, that's one thing. And the other one is post-COVID, there is so much talk about trauma. Everything, it seems like it's prolific about trauma. And I think I'd like to look at it through a different lens, as you're inviting us, Heather, is through the lens of joy. Can we really focus our lens away from the trauma? Even the indigenous people who experience so much trauma have so much resilience. So how can we balance that and a beautiful reminder to have multi-focus or multi-lens through which what we look out at our world with intention. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Raj. I agree. I think that I have this feeling that more people are also, it's like, we need to learn about and understand trauma, and we need to keep it in balance, right? And so I'm hearing more people also wanting to make that shift.
Yeah. Yeah, and as Raj is saying, I referenced that in a couple of my recent blog posts about how I had this real growing awareness this year, because I've really set an intention towards tenderness and liberation as I travel this year. And one of those realizations was that I've spent so much of the last 10 to 15 years really looking at my trauma, and that's important work. I'm really glad I did that healing work. And I think it's time for me to shift and turn my focus and my lens towards, okay, so what's my intention toward joy? How do I move in that direction? There was a hand up, and then, there it is, Tammy.
What came alive for me when you were talking about the swinging bridge, and we were talking about the first 2 points of honoring the unpleasant and also cultivating, the joy points. I was thinking about one mountain being the glimmers of joy of my life and the other mountain being the triggers. And what I'm really going to take away is, how do I titrate between those two things? It is a swinging bridge. It is organic. It is always moving. I do practice internal family systems, but I'm really going to sit with the wisdom that was shared today. And how do I titrate is my big takeaway that I wanted to share.
One other thing I want to say that's, I think, somewhat related to what I've heard a few people make reference to, is that joy is also a revolutionary act. Joy is what helps us disrupt some of the systems that are oppressive, and who is I always forget who the quote comes from. Joy is a revolutionary act. Was it Bell Hooks or one of those teachers, Audre Lorde, one of them? Somebody can maybe look it up, but to think about joy as our way of actually standing up against those harmful systems that want to oppress and that marginalize different groups of people. If we can stand up with joy, that's actually a way to challenge those systems. Is there anyone else who wants to offer something up? If not, Mary and I, there's one, Rhonda.
Hi. I just wanted to share one of my favorite quotes related exactly to what we're talking about. It's from Elizabeth Gilbert in one of her earlier books, Eat, Pray, Love, where she said that happiness is never a selfish act when you consider how much pain and damage and heartache is caused in the world by unhappy people. So it's, again, I think relates to being a revolutionary act and being something that helps all of our ecosystems that we travel in.
Thank you for that, Rhonda. Yes, and I heartily agree with that we contribute by seeking out and engaging it with our own joy and embracing it. We are actually contributing to making the world a better place. Mary, I think we've each got time maybe for one more point, and then we'll wrap it up with making the draw for the grand prize.
Okay. I'm going to combine my two into one then. I was trying to decide, I don't know which one. So I think they're both really good points. So start out with this one I'll just go through it briefly. And this is actually, I started learning this from Raj. So Raj, if you're still here, I can't see if she's still here. But it is about not taking things personally. And I think that one really good practice that helps me feel joyful is actually the act of not taking things personally. And Raj taught it to us in a session on nonviolent communication. She used the acronym Q-tip, quit taking it personally. She gave us all a little Q-tip, which was really great. So, the question I was thinking about is, how has taking things personally impacted you and your experience of joy? Right. And one activity or a couple little activities that I was thinking that if you wanted to practice this, like how to shift your mindset away from taking things personally, I was thinking you could make a list of things that you've taken personally, things that you feel annoyed, offended, upset. And then I have a few games you could play with a list. So let's say on my list, I have something today. I was thinking of something real. I'm at a hotel in Mexico City. I really wanted to stay in my room just 1 extra hour so that I could be here and do it in my room. And it really annoyed me that they wouldn't let me do that without paying a whole nother day worth at the hotel. So that's one little thing that was like annoying that I take it personally. Think about it. It's like, come on, in the past, people have let me, I don't know, you can push it, right? So one of the games I have is a wonder if game. So I take that whatever it is that, so let's say I didn't get my way just now. I wanted to have a room instead they gave me this really nice little business room, which is nice. But to go back to the game, I wonder if. So I wonder if the person in front of me is having a hard day. I wonder if actually for me to get that room for 1 more hour, it involves a lot more complications than I'm aware of. I wonder if, and I just keep going through my list, I come up with as many wonder ifs as possible, either about myself, about the other person, or about the context, until I can sort of expand my brain away from that taking it personally and being annoyed. Right? So that's one little tip. And then another game I like to play with things that my list of annoyances and things I take personally is because of that. And for this game, with the same thing, okay, so I wasn't able to extend my room at the hotel. Because of that, I actually had to come back by about 12:15 so I could check out at 1. And because of that, I gave myself a really strict time limit at the market. So because of that, I actually didn't spend much money today, which is probably a good thing. Even though there's so many cool things at the Mexican market. Also, because of that, I actually ended up in this little room that's very private and quiet, and I think has decent internet. And because of that, I actually had 2 conversations with hotel staff about what I'm doing. And this one person said she wants the website and she wants to learn more. Okay. So I was annoyed about not being able to have this extra hour in the room in the hotel, but because of that, it's happened. And I'm shifting my perspective, broadening, and sort of sinking into, oh, it's pretty cool. I mean, actually, that was very unplanned. I try to take things really spontaneously in these sessions, and it's pretty cool that she asked for the website when I told her what we were going to be talking about. That was really cool. So quit taking things personally. That's my one practice. And then the last one, which we've already mentioned briefly, I'm just going to briefly mention it. The biggest joy trigger is gratitude for me, the practice of gratitude, and not just a, oh, thank you very much gratitude, but gratitude that comes from like, what's the impact? What needs of mine have been met, or what is it that I've gained by saying, so really being able to identify something. So rather than just saying, hey, Heather, thanks for this webinar. It's been really nice. I appreciate it. That's like superficial gratitude, but the gratitude, that's nice, but it doesn't necessarily help get us to the joy point. But the joy point is, geez, Heather, having a chance to share this webinar with you, first of all, it got me to think about and organize my thoughts around this in a way that I hadn't done before. And I am really, as one of the participants said, I am realizing how much juicy information we have, and I have, and it's helping me think a little bit more about my experiences with joy that I hadn't really organized. And yeah, I'm feeling really grateful for that. It's actually making me feel like I'm strengthening my joy muscle by actually doing this with you. So I really appreciate that. That's deep gratitude.
So, yeah, I'd like to invite people to chime in the chat room and offer up one thing that you're feeling gratitude for right now. Let's turn our thoughts towards what brings us joy and pop that into the chat. And while you're doing that, I'm going to start my last point because I don't want it to. I want to have a bit of time at the end for the draw, and so my last point is going to be that you can make one small choice or big choice to shift the course of your life toward joy. And when I think about that, if you imagine there's a big ship that's heading towards Europe from the US, let's say, and that ship only needs to take a slight course correction and they can end up in Africa instead of Europe. So it may not take you very much to just make, are you hearing me? I'm seeing everybody frozen again.
Yeah, we're hearing.
Yeah, you're hearing me. So what I'm inviting you to consider as we wrap up this webinar is what is one small choice you can take that might shift the course of your life so that you end up in joy instead of in distress or frustration or something, or, you know, that you set the course for whatever the remainder of your life is. And when I think about that, I think about the little and then quite big choices that I made in this regard. I started awakening to that realization that I didn't have enough joy, that I wasn't being intentional enough about this, and made some really intentional choices. What did I want to do when my kids were moving out of the house? And that's how I ended up selling my house, moving out, going on this journey where I'm really focusing on, okay, what brings me joy? What's the next place I want to land on this journey that might be a place of joy for me? So it might be a small thing. It might be saying no to something that no longer brings you joy, a volunteer position that you have, or some way that you're contributing to your family or community that you want to say no to. Maybe that's your one little decision, but I invite you to consider when you leave this call, what is one thing that might change the course of your ship from going to Europe to going to Africa in our little metaphor. So that brings us to the end. And again, I hope you heard enough of what I said to make sense of it. I was going to say I apologize for the internet, but I can't do anything to change that or control it. So I'm hopeful that it was good enough. And I wanted to give a little bit of space now to first, I'm going to invite Lucy to let us know who won the draw for a free registration and Know Yourself for Yourself. And then I wanted to share a little bit about Know Yourself for Yourself. It's an 8-week course, starts the week of March 13th. And we go through 8 weeks of different ways that you can learn to know yourself better so that you can shift the course of your ship towards joy. The last lesson of, I can't remember how many lessons there are. I think there's 2 lessons each week, and maybe the 15th or 16th is specifically on joy, because that's the direction we want to take in this course, is how do we move our ships in that direction. And we've done it once. This will be our second time. We're really delighted to have you. I'm going to invite Lucy to do the draw, and then I'm going to open up if there are any questions or thoughts or comments about either what you've heard here today, or if you want to ask us questions about the upcoming course. So Lucy, do you have a name ready for who's our winner?
So one thing I love is singing bowls. So I decided to write everybody's name onto little pieces of paper. So somebody fell out. And so I'm going to draw the name. You can see it being mixed up. And the winner is, Melanie. Melanie. Hey, you're the winner.
Yay,
Really?
Melanie.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait because I'm able to do this. I'm so excited. Heather, I did a course with you years ago, and I've been wanting to do another one again. So I'm absolutely ecstatic. I thank you.
I'm so glad. I'm delighted that you're going to join us. So you can either pop your email address into the chat, either to me directly, privately, and I'll send it to Krista, or you can email Krista and say, I'm the winner of the prize. And her email is krista@centerforholdingspace.com, whichever feels easier for you. And we'll make sure that you get registered for the course. Congratulations. I see your email addresses there. Great.
Yeah, thank you so very much. Oh, I'm so grateful.
We have
All
a couple
right.
of people here who've taken the course. And I think we have a little bit of time, but how about, would anybody like to share a comment on their experience on the course?
I know that Lucy, for instance, Lucy,
SJ.
I'm putting you on the spot, but SJ, go ahead first.
Okay, so yeah, last term, I guess it was, I signed up 24 hours beforehand because something kept pushing me to do it. And I am so grateful for doing it. It has completely changed the course of my life. Doing the foundation program right now, and learning so many amazing things in that. But I think the foundation program really shifted my focus because there was so many different things that I didn't have words for, that I was learning and feeling, that I didn't know how to explain to other people. And the course gave me the vocabulary that I needed to be able to explain that to others. Things like generational trauma that I knew, DNA wise, something was going on, but couldn't tell you what the heck that meant. Now I have the words for that. I also really, really enjoyed the format that was presented to us with the different videos each week, with Heather and the gurus, I guess you want to call them, and the amazing inclusivity of the program and all the different voices that came, that brought that knowledge to us. Yeah, it was just right at the right time. And I'm very, very grateful to have been part of that program. Peace back to center.
Thank you, SJ. And I do want to say that is one of the things that I'm most proud of with the course, is that there's a really solid resource base to the course. It's really well researched, and I provide far more resources than you'll be able to read during the course or watch during the course of the course, but you get access to it forever. You can keep going back to it. And so there's a lot of information, a lot of resources, and a lot of other wise guides. I've interviewed, I think, 16 or 17 different people that really have inspired me and provided videos of them. Lucy, were you going to offer something?
Oh, I am so happy to speak about it because I think it's a program that keeps on giving. I come back to the resource material, but also just, recollections of conversations that we had while we were together, or the information that was shared through the wise guides. And just as a little sidebar, I actually did it with two of my sisters, and it was very interesting, let's just say, and really has been a wonderful thing in our relationship, which was already good, but it's deepened it even further. Heather and Mary and Mose is somebody on the team who are just fantastic, and I felt very held while I was doing it. I've studied with Heather now in person and online for many, many years. And I think this program gives you just such a massive bang for your buck, in terms of, the investment you make with money, but also with time. It's just so much, it's so deeply personal. And as I said, I'm still processing stuff from it. I come back to the materials, and I could not recommend it highly enough. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lucy. So we have a few minutes left. I want to open it up if there's anybody that wants to offer anything in wrapping up what we've talked about today, or if you have a question about Know Yourself for Yourself, this is a moment to do that.
I do
I'm
have
not sure.
one, I have one question about know yourself for yourself. Will we be if we sign up for it, is there opportunity for small group conversations or is it all large group format?
We do breakout rooms every week. And so far, we've only done it once. And last year we had, we would have different breakout rooms every week. Like, so it wasn't consistency. We do really invite people though to reach out to other people and create their own little conversation groups. One of the things that we do in our the Holding Space Foundation program is we pair everybody up with a course buddy. We don't do that in this one because it's a shorter course, but we invite people to reach out to other people and have those conversations as well. SJ, I see your hand, and I realize I'm cutting in and out. I don't know for sure. I'm hoping people are hearing me still.
Yeah.
I found it really, really easy to connect with the other participants. I know Lucy and I talked via chat, as well as some of the other people in the course. And we were able to break off onto Facebook or other platforms as well to support each other later on. But the Mighty Networks, as it's changing and growing, is a really neat space for this because of the way it's set up. It's really integrational, allows you to have way more connection than I would have thought of in the first place. And hearing about the course, I was very impressed with how much support that I got from people that I have no idea where they're from, who they are at the beginning. And now I have friends all over the world from it, and people who are ready to have these conversations and open to opening up my mind. But yeah, I found it really, really easy to connect to other people. The space just felt so safe and honored, and everyone was passionate about what we were talking about. Peace back to center.
I think one of the things that you're saying, SJ, is something I've always noticed too, is that we manage to attract the best kind of people. Like we just really gather a lot of really interesting people from around the world who want to talk about these issues. And so it isn't hard, like SJ says, to find good conversation partners in the community. Linda, I see your hand, and then I think we're going to need to draw it to a close.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. I just want to thank you for being part of my life ever since you wrote that first blog post about your mother's death. It's just, I've done some of the foundation course. It was all I could manage financially, but it was lovely. And I've shared it, and I've shared the book about tenderness with a friend here. And honestly, this is deep heart stuff. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you to you, Linda, too. I'm glad you're part of my life. And I'm always so pleased with the people that keep popping back into my circles. And, you know, they come to me for a course early on, and then they come back years later because they still want to be in conversation. And that really warms my heart to keep doing this work. Mary, let's read the closing poem. And I realize that I'm cutting out, and if I'm cutting out quite a bit, I'm going to let you read it first. And then maybe, Lucy, do you want to read it the second time?
Okay. This closing poem is by Mary Oliver. Joy is not made to be a crumb. If you suddenly and unexpectedly feel joy, don't hesitate, give in to it. There are plenty of lives and whole towns destroyed or about to be. We are not wise and not very often kind, and much can never be redeemed. Still, life has some possibility left. Perhaps this is its way of fighting back. That sometimes something happens better than all the riches or power in the world. Could be anything, but very likely you notice it in the instant when love begins. Anyway, that's often the case. Anyway, whatever it is, don't be afraid of its plenty. Joy is not made to be a crumb.
Joy is not made to be a crumb by Mary Oliver. If you suddenly and unexpectedly feel joy, don't hesitate. Give in to it. There are plenty of lives and whole towns destroyed or about to be. We are not wise and not very often kind, and much can never be redeemed. Still, life has some possibility left. Perhaps this is its way of fighting back, that sometimes something happens better than all the riches or power in the world. It could be anything, but very likely you notice it in an instant when love begins. Anyway, that's often the case. Anyway, whatever it is, don't be afraid of its plenty. Joy is not made to be a crumb.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. I
you for
hope
being with
that
us.
I hope your day brings you joy. I hope you find something that you find a joy trigger today that gives you something to delight in. And I hope to see you again sometime out here on these internet streets.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Feel free to unmute, say goodbye, hello.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Oh, and
Thank you.
if
Bye.
Irene is still on, did she stay on? Irene, you were asking of the trauma doctor in New Zealand. It's Dr. Robin Youngson. I'm typing that into the chat. She's still with us?
Yeah,
Yeah,
she
where'd
is.
she go? She is. Okay, there she is. Yes, I see her, Irene. Yeah, and it's called Havening Touch. I think if you Google Dr. Robin Youngson Havening Touch, you'll find his website.
Havening touch. Okay. Yeah. Oh, that's yeah. I was hearing that
Yeah.
haven word, but I'd never heard it. So thank
Yeah,
you.
it's a
Thanks for
new word
today.
for me too. Yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah, it was brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming I will see some of you soon.
Yeah, and Melanie, you should get an email popping in fairly soon, inviting you to sign on to Mighty Networks. I'll make sure Krista gets your email address, and then you'll join us. We get to see you soon.
Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day.
Oh, I'm seeing that Mary already beat me to it. Mary's quite efficient, and she popped your email address into the chat with Krista already. So
Okay.
it's gonna happen.
Thank you so much. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.